Thank you. This is actually the last session, thankfully, and it's quite short, so it won't be that painful. I represent Pelican AI, and as she said, we actually are an AI solution provider for a number of years. One of the things I'd like to do, my slides are not up yet.
Oh, yeah, just on there.
Oh, okay. Is to sort of focus on the fact that, AI is not required to be this uncontrolled nuisance, for want of a better word. We have been in this industry for last 25 years. We've worked with large banks across the globe and with large corporates. And we do believe there's a method in the madness of AI. And one of the key points I want to get across today is the fact that we have been able to achieve certain things across the globe, as I said. And idea would be to focus on what is needed, what are the key challenges, how does AI help us get there. And I'll spend some time on a very short case study to sort of explain what we did at a large bank, what were the issues involved, how we sort of used aspects of AI and our overall technology to tide over some of the key issues that the bank faced in a trade environment, right? So in terms of, from our perspective, what is needed, right? I think one of the key issues that we faced at the bank and elsewhere was integration. To be able to sort of dive into a large core trading platform, to be able to absorb and pull in information at the right time and of the right category, and to be able to understand the various statuses of trade as part of that integration. That, I think, is sort of the first base in a end-to-end AI-based trade platform. And we have been able to achieve that using certain aspects of what we call APIs. I'm not sure if that sounds familiar. I see a few nods in the crowd where, there is something called RESTful APIs where we pass information back, and there's something called webhooks where we pull information into our system. And that, I think, is a critical aspect of the mix. And again, this goes into the fact that all these helps to control what AI does. So as long as there are proper controls in, as long as there are proper checks and balances in, there's a way to manage this quite. That's point number one. The second bit is something called intelligent data processing. And what that means is to be able to use automation of documents and extract information from those documents. We believe that, I think, trade is sort of the last bastion of launderers, and they hide behind these voluminous trade documents. I think from my estimate, there are about 30 plus trade documents in a single trade transaction. And the idea is that how do we effectively manage the information? How do we effectively pull the information that's needed and use it effectively? And that's where there's something called intelligent data processing that comes in. And I'll spend some time on that as we roll forward, where we are able to understand what is inside those trade documents, pull the right information, and feed into a compliance engine and create the red alerts that we want. So that is step number two. The third aspect is sort of being able to extract over 300 different trade data elements, which then feed into a compliance engine. So the whole idea would be that to be able to process those trade documents, extract the information, and then hand off to a AI-powered sanctions and trade red flags engine, which would then sort of automate the entire compliance solution that is at play, right? So just very quickly, in terms of what are the various trade sanctions challenges, I think you guys know more about this than a solution provider like us can. But I think overall the landscape is complex. I think you all agree on that. The volumes are rising. What we find is there are resource constraints. We've been talking to banks in the Middle East, especially, and they say that, yes, we want to do this. We have received strictures from the central banks, but we can't do the project until next year because we don't have the people. And that, I think, actually feeds into the entire problem of having a holistic sanctions control in place. Because if there's budget, there are no people, and if there are people, there is not enough pressure. And all this, I think, all the ducks have to be aligned to make sure that there is a proper program in place to roll things forward. In terms of the documents, data, and parties, I think we are all aware that there's a plethora of documents, 30 plus, 300 plus different data elements, and there are scores of parties involved and jurisdictions involved, which only further sort of complicates the matter. Yeah, and that feeds into the idea that although the world is smart now, the launderers are smarter. And the geopolitical elements of today with all the wars and basic distrust among countries is only adding fuel to fire. So we believe there is a game changer at play, right? So I was promised to deliver some good news, and here it is that we believe that there's something called intelligent document processing I mentioned early on, which relies on a multitude of AI technologies. So what it does is, originally, the trade automation solution relied on something called OCR, which converted images to text, and then that text was somehow understood and sort of put into the systems to work with. But that gave hardly any extraction. It was barely 15 to 20%, but that actually didn't really pan out well on the cost-benefit analysis. But we do see that in the last 2 or 3 years, there's something called document AI that's come in, which intelligently understands, like our human does, the various aspects of a trade document. So the OCR merely converts the image to a text, but that text still has to be understood, which is where document AI comes in, so that it knows automatically that this is, for example, sort of a counterparty, this is a currency, this is a jurisdiction, this is an intermediary bank, and this is a goods description. And from that point of view, the HS codes are also automatically derived from within the bank's back office systems. Semantic understanding sort of goes beyond that, a step ahead, where it uses something called natural language processing, with again a very human-like, intuitive way of doing things. So you give us sort of a completely unstructured, unformatted piece of information, and we would understand that quite intelligently to know what is it that is going on. So we can process faxes, which was sort of any case on the way out. We can process emails. We can process free format trade documents. And from that point of view, I think it only adds to the overall power of AI to sort of increase the automation levels. And I think the final aspect here is we are seeing this increasingly is generative AI. And this again on the back of these large language models, it also sort of is giving it that extra push. And we believe that in a year or so's time, a Gen AI enabled solution can extract 100% of a trade document. And this, we believe, is sort of a key enabler, because once you have the information handy, once you have the information in a format that can be used, passed on, processed, and analyzed, that actually will help us understand things much better. And given the fact that there are these large documents in a single trade transaction, to be able to have this data in an electronic format, which can be used and processed and analyzed, will give us that push into a proper AI-enabled trade solution. Now, I know this looks a bit complicated, and it is to an extent, but I think what this diagram tries to show is that there are multiple processes at play. When you talk about AI for trade automation, it's a one sentence, but underneath that, there's a whole range of solutions at play. So as you can see, there are these 4 key pillars of our end-to-end AI platforms. There is something called document digitization that we're all quite aware. There's something called document validation, where each jurisdiction has its own requirement to validate the documents. There are certain syntaxes, there are certain requirements in terms of how that information is presented. And that actually is also a key aspect of automation and making sure that the trade is handled properly and in a time-bound manner. Then there is the whole compliance mix of compliance screening, where there is, again, something called natural language processing and machine learning, which gives that push towards effectiveness and efficiency, making sure that it accurately detects, but it also reduces false positives. And then finally, there is a UI-based approach where you look at alert management, and within that, you look at the various red flags. There is a case management, there is reporting, and there is a proper audit trail to make sure that things are managed properly and audited. So on the back of this, there are various aspects at play. If you see the boxes far down below are the various sources of information. So there are information that is provided by Sanctions data providers. There are information. There's information that is provided by the vessel tracking systems. There is information provided by the dual-use goods, information that is there within the bank's KYC systems, and all that information can be pulled into a proper trade solution to make sure that there is a solution at play that handles this, the system end to end. So the whole idea would be that the power of a trade solution aimed at compliance rests on its ability to have an end-to-end platform. Because unless you have information that is processed effectively, unless you have data that is extracted properly, you will not be able to use that data for compliance. And that actually is the sort of the half the battle, so to speak, to make sure that we are able to manage things well. Now, what can AI technology do from a sanctions control point of view? As I've been saying, the trade IDP solution for intelligent document processing, the ability to manage a trade using a proper system for control, along with audit trails, explainability, and a proper user interface allows us to make sure that there is a full view and view and control on understanding how things are happening. We also do something called consistency checks. And what that means is we make sure that, for example, the customer invoice, the bill of lading, the shipper's advice, and the actual final payment that is going out are all saying the same thing. Making sure that there is a proper, consistent way of managing all this 30 plus documents that come in a single transaction. And that is handled in a way that the system will tell you immediately if there is something wrong or right. And that is also an important aspect of an automated trade solution. There's screening and dual-use goods checks. There is about over 108, I think, about of TBML red flags that actually focus on the customer profiles. It focuses on whether this customer is acting suspiciously, whether it is something that is expected of this customer given his past behavior with the company. And it goes beyond, again, looking at just screening aspects of it. And the trade validations we have spoken of. And so all these are the various technology approaches that go into a proper trade sanctions and compliance solution. And what we've done is we've been able to actually achieve this at a large bank. And from that point of view, just to give you a very high level view as to what we did there, right? So, we did sanctions compliance, where we used a branch of AI called natural language processing and something called machine learning, which I'm sure you guys know by now, where the natural language processing focuses on effectiveness, where it sort of highlights and accurately detects a sanction screening pattern. So, for example, there's a pattern called Baghdad-Strasse. Now, most filters would find Baghdad, and when Iraq was blacklisted back then, it'll block the transaction. But we would know on the back of the NLP technology we have that Baghdad-Strasse is actually a street, and it is not to do with a city in Iraq. And there are scores of such examples where there are systems looking for patterns instead of a system that understands the whole trade view holistically and then sees if this pattern makes sense. So that is key. We also have machine learning, where we look at something called efficiency on the back of effectiveness, where we find that banks sometimes and even corporates go helter-skelter trying to install these fancy large trade systems, and what that does is it creates this huge mountain load of false positives, and the entire compliance staff, the legal staff, the operations staff are literally buried under those false alerts. And that actually defeats the whole purpose. And we always say to the regulators and also to the compliance team at a bank or a corporate is that we need to find that, fine balance in terms of understanding the overarching compliance goal of tracking, blocking, and reviewing everything. And how does that compare to the operational overload of that policy will sort of evolve into? And it's understanding what is the kind of sort of the risk appetite you're okay with, what is the kind of scenarios you're okay with, and exactly what are you looking for. And that actually is something that as a solution provider, we would share in terms of what's happening elsewhere. We as a AI expert, so to speak, we would be able to sort of also make sure that we offer that kind of guidance, right? And again, what we've achieved there is a high detection rate, and a fairly low false positive rate. We have been able to extract over 3,000 various data elements across 28 plus different trade document types, and we've been able to achieve 85% extraction rate across the board. And that actually was, as I said, half the battle, where once you have the data available, there are ways of understanding, using, and analyzing that data, which feeds into the various red flags. And the red flags, we have about 108 different red flags across sanctions, across name screening, across DOG goods, and the various profiling related red flags. We also sort of build a proper end-to-end anti-money laundering detections. Yeah, so just a very quick view on that. In terms of, I'm not sure if this is visible or not, but this is the sort of the architecture, and as an AI solution provider, this for us is a treat, but perhaps not for you guys. But this is something that we live on, right? So this is the overall data flow diagram, right? So you can see, so at the far left and the far right are the trade core systems, where our system in the middle would talk to them using the APIs we just spoke about. So there's a data flow happening at both ends. So once we take in and ingest a trade document from the core system, we immediately pass an information back. So that happens through the webhooks, as I said, and we also allow the trade core system to call our APIs to sort of do these checks at their end before, for example, a document is processed. And once that handoff happens between us and the trade core, the circles you see in the middle are the core aspects of a proper trade engine, where you can actually do sanction screening, dual-use goods, data consistency checks, trade digitization, trade validation, and all this actually happens as soon as a trade document is ingested for a given trade transaction. And the yellow boxes on top are the various user interfaces. So it's not a black box. You don't know what the heck's going on, but you can actually view it, you can control it, and some of the various aspects of our sort of explanations to the regulators as well is explainability and auditability. So we don't want to be this sort of man wearing a mask, not knowing what the heck is he saying. We want to be somebody that explains. We want to be doing things that is repeatable, that is sort of something that happens without a doubt every single time. And that happens on the basis of a solution that is tested and proven. And the UI actually feeds into that whole idea that AI has to be explainable, and it will give you information in terms of all the various alerts that are created, why they are created, the various aspects of the underlying data that has contributed to the alert is clearly highlighted. And then there is the reporting aspect as well, where you can create reports and analyze and make sure that the compliance, the regulators, and the management team are fully informed as to why this alert has taken place and what has been done about it. Yeah, the whole idea is that AI does not have to be this nuisance or a monster, if you will, for want of a better word. As long as there are controls in place, as long as there are best practices in place, as long as there are case studies in place where we learn from the past, we understand what has happened in the past, we understand what has gone right, we understand what has not gone right, and we build on it. So it's an evolving landscape where I think the banks, the corporates, the regulators, and solution providers are growing more and more intelligent every day to know how to do things better. And I think we are on the cusp of a true revolution on the back of the IDP solution that we just spoke about, where this is a true game changer, and it'll allow us to actually go the extra mile and have a proper trade solution in place, not far out in the future. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.